For most people, family is the foundation of life. Within the family, we learn to love, take care of others, and build relationships. But what if the family does not become a source of support and love? We don't get to choose our parents. We cannot change the past or choose another family. Unfortunately, not all kids are born into loving families. Some children face indifference or cruelty from their parents, which can lead to serious psychological trauma and problems in adulthood. Amber Gibson and her brother, Connor Gibson, didn't have a loving family. They grew up watching their father, Peter Gibson, physically abuse their mom, Anne Marie Adams. It continued throughout the period from August 2001 to August 2007. In 2008, their father was sentenced to 10 years in prison for several violent crimes. The father's behavior created a far from favorable environment for the children. They grew up in an atmosphere of terror and cruelty, especially Connor. Things began to change in 2008 when their father was sent to prison. It seemed that the family could finally find peace. But after their father's arrest, their mother, Anne Marie Adams, began abusing alcohol and stopped caring for the children. Amber was only 3 years old, and her brother was 5 when they were taken away from the family. Craig and Carol Niven became their foster parents. Described as the most giving, loving, supportive, and admirable young girl, Amber had shown hints of great promise. Although she had experienced immense suffering, she harbored an amazing outlook on life and loved art and singing, her loved ones said. Unfortunately, Connor never recovered from the abuse. The boy had behavioral problems from an early age. He was introverted and had difficulties adjusting to school. There were rumors about his outbursts of rage. He could lash out at strangers. As he grew older, he became more and more like his father. He most often directed his aggression at girls. Despite his pleasant appearance, he was a rather violent young man, so his classmates avoided him and considered him a dangerous person. As a result of all this, Connor had almost no friends. He actively used social media to share his thoughts. He wrote about his depression, anxiety, and attention deficit. As a teenager, he was left alone with his problems. Connor complained that those around him did not accept him and judged him. He didn't think he was bad. He was just trying to cope with the consequences of his father's tyranny. He was convinced that his father was to blame for all his problems. Despite his attempts at socialization, he could not even find a common language with his sister, who was only a couple of years younger. His foster parents tried not to leave them alone together, realizing that it could lead to a conflict or even a fight. After the pair moved in with the Nivens, there were concerns about Connor Gibson's behavior, with Mr. Niven describing the siblings as not a good mix. To minimize the time the siblings spent together, the foster parents decided it would be best for Connor and Amber to attend different schools. Connor went to a secondary school for kids with social, emotional, and behavioral needs, Keir Campus in Blantyre, Lanarkshire, while Amber attended Morehouse Academy in West Lothian's Bathgate. As they grew older, they faced new challenges, and Connor found them particularly difficult. For obvious reasons, he was unable to have romantic relationships. His temper scared people away, and none of the girls wanted to get involved with him. It made him extremely angry, and he began to systematically direct his aggression toward his sister, picking fights over any little thing. The tension in their relationship escalated to the point where Amber could no longer stand to live with him under the same roof. When Amber was just 14 years old, the foster care arrangement broke down, and she moved into the Hill House Children's Unit while her brother remained with the Nivens until his 18th birthday. In 2020, Connor left his foster parents' home, tired of their control. At the time, he was a resident at Hamilton's Blue Triangle Project, a hostel for homeless youngsters. Despite their separation, Amber and Connor continued to see each other occasionally. Their relationship got a little better as there were fewer reasons to fight. Unfortunately, life had a new challenge in store for Amber. While being looked after by social services, Amber was attacked by Jamie Stars at his home in Bothwell in June 2021. Stars had contact with Amber against her will. I think you understand what the word contact means in this case. At the time Stars attacked Amber, he was on bail after being arrested for a similar crime. Sentencing Stars, who appeared via video link from custody, the judge said, "You have been convicted of appalling crimes against two innocent teenage girls, and you have been assessed as being a very high risk of sexual violence on release. I am required to take into account your age and difficult upbringing. However, the crimes remain serious and grave, and I will impose an extended sentence." He said that he would have ordered 11 years to be served in custody, but reduced this to 10.5 years behind bars to take into account the time that Stars has spent on remand. Stars was also found guilty of a breach of bail conditions and of attempting to pervert the course of justice. 16-year-old Amber faced difficulties that seemed insurmountable to her. She lost interest in studying and socializing with friends and became more withdrawn and irritable. She felt lonely. It seemed to her that no one could understand her feelings and experiences. But unfortunately, the rough patch in her life did not end there. On November 26, 2021, Amber shared with a friend that she had plans to meet with her brother. She was excited, hoping he had changed during their separation, and the old conflicts would remain in the past. After Connor called the Hill House unit where Amber lived to talk to his sister, the manager tried to dissuade Amber from meeting her brother, but she didn't listen. They initially met at their foster parents' house and then went for a walk to discuss some issues. CCTV footage shows the two walking along the streets of Hamilton with one another, with Amber later sending a selfie of the two captioned, "My big bro." It was the last time anyone would hear from her alive. Connor would later return in a disheveled state and tell a project worker that he and his sister had argued. This worker later admitted that his appearance and strange behavior frightened her. Connor looked sullen, was breathing heavily, and his hands were stained to the wrists. The project worker became concerned and asked if everything was okay, but he ignored the questions. Instead, Connor asked for permission to use the phone. He said he had an argument with his sister, so he left, leaving her alone. But now he wanted to make sure she was okay and that she was back at the Hill House unit. Connor called the unit, but it turned out Amber wasn't there. Staff at the facility contacted Amber's foster parents, but they did not know where she was. The following morning, Amber was reported missing. Despite his sister's disappearance, Connor was unusually indifferent. He didn't call the foster parents or try to find out what happened to her. He just waited for the police to find her. During this period, the police have already begun search operations. To get leads, the investigators turned to the last person who communicated with Amber. They went to see Connor, and the latter confirmed they had gone for a walk the night before she disappeared. Connor said that, as always, there was an argument between them, so he walked away, leaving his sister crying in the park. Before reaching the hostel, he wandered around the neighborhood for a while. The Blue Triangle project worker told the investigators that when Connor returned to the hostel, his clothes and hands were dirty. Connor claimed he got lost that night and even fell into a ditch in the dark, which explained his dirty hands and clothes. Connor's words raised the detective's suspicions. The last confirmed sighting of Amber was in Casdow Street, close to a bridge. Connor confidently pointed out the places on the map where he met his sister, where they walked in the park, and where he left her. However, when asked about the location of the ditch he fell into, Connor became confused. The investigators were trying to find out who was with Connor at that moment and who could confirm his words, but the young man was evasive. The police did not manage to get any helpful information from him. After that, the police checked all possible places where Amber could be, her friends, acquaintances, and relatives. They also checked the city's neighborhoods, including parks, forests, and abandoned buildings. But Amber was nowhere to be found. At that time, the police had very few leads and clues, but they continued to work, not giving up. The police interviewed everyone who could help in the search and utilized all available resources. Unfortunately, the first few days of the search yielded no results. Amber was still missing. The police continued to search for Amber, knowing that every minute counted, but there was no happy ending to this story. Amber Gibson was discovered by a police officer near a burn in a park in Hamilton, South Lanarkshire, on November 28, 2021. The 16-year-old was said to have been unclothed and covered by branches allegedly cut from a tree. As it became known later, Amber's body was discovered by 45-year-old Stephen Corrigan. But instead of reporting it to the police, he inappropriately touched her body and hid it. His DNA was discovered on 39 areas of her body, including her breasts, buttocks, and thighs. He was arrested and charged with attempting to obstruct the course of justice. Amber's body was found near the place where she was last seen. She was beaten before she died. Her clothes had been ripped off her and were lying in another place. The fact that Amber was naked made the motive for this crime obvious. The news of her death shocked all the locals. When Connor found out about the incident, he published a post on social media in memory of his sister, expressing deep regret and sadness over her death. People brought flowers to the park where her body was found. However, 2 days later, the equally shocking news for the locals was that Amber's brother, Connor Gibson, had been arrested as the prime suspect. As Amber's body lay on the cold forensic table, the attentive expert immediately noticed 8 distinctive bruises on her neck, clear signs of strangulation. There were numerous significant blunt force traumas to her head. Due to the particular brutality of the attack, it was suggested that the perpetrator had personal motives. The forensic expert concluded that Amber was first attacked and beaten, and then she lost consciousness from the blow to her head. The cause of her death was strangulation. Her torn clothes were found close to her body, as if ripped in a fit of rage during the attack. It was determined that Amber died 2 days before Stephen Corrigan contacted the police. However, the man had an alibi, so he was excluded from the list of suspects. At the same time, Amber's brother Connor aroused suspicion with his behavior. In real life, he was indifferent. While on social media, he tried to give the impression that he was suffering because of the loss of his sister. Under a photo of his sister, he wrote, "Amber, you will fly high for the rest of time. We will all miss you. Especially me. I love you, Ginger Midget." The investigators knew about Connor's quick temper and frequent quarrels with his sister. He was the last person to see her alive. So the police focused their attention on him and began gathering evidence to press charges. The detectives obtained CCTV footage, thanks to which they were able to reconstruct the last minutes of Amber's life. At 9:57 p.m., Amber and her brother crossed a bridge near a park. At 9:51 p.m., she posted a selfie with Connor in which she looked happy, indicating she was in a good mood at that time. They were apparently heading to the park where her body was later found. During the investigation, the police released several CCTV recordings. In the footage, Connor can be seen taking a bin full of objects out of the Blue Triangle homeless hostel, where he was living in Hamilton just before 1 a.m. on November 27, 2021, the day after Amber died. Connor Gibson can be seen leaving through the front door before walking through a car park with the items. He then gets rid of them out of shot before walking back to the accommodation with an empty bin. Other footage shows him on the night of his sister's disappearance when he was returning home shortly before midnight. A security camera caught him walking home down the town's Barrack Street. After crossing the road, Connor Gibson stops and leans against a fence using his outstretched arms with his head hanging between them. He waits in this position before collecting himself and carrying on down the pavement. The police found the jacket and shoes Connor was wearing the night his sister died. There were traces of dirt and blood on them. The analysis showed that the blood belonged to Amber, confirming his involvement in the crime. Connor didn't throw away his clothes and shoes because he had no spare ones. If he had the chance, he probably would have thrown everything away. But in the absence of other clothes, he tried to clean the dirt and blood off his jacket, but not thoroughly enough, which played into the hands of the investigators. His DNA was also found on her shorts, worn as underwear, which had been forcibly torn off. A phone seized from Gibson's residence following his arrest revealed messages sent from his Snapchat account to friends in the early hours of November 27th. The message said, "I'm really going to need you guys' help with something when yous come back. I'm being serious." A message was then sent to Amber asking, "Are you okay?" Before another was sent to the same previous friend saying, "Never mind, it's all good." The browser history obtained from the phone showed Connor searched How to get nosy police officers to stop monitoring your phone. It was on the night of Amber's death. The investigators found that Connor met with his sister that night, and they went for a walk, trying to patch things up. The footage shows that they were talking calmly, and everything looked normal, until they entered the park where the conflict began. The result of this conflict was Amber's strangulation and death. Perhaps the fact that Connor had abused his own sister and the fact that he was afraid she would tell someone about it drove him to take her life. Connor Gibson was charged with multiple counts. Despite the abundance of irrefutable evidence, he stubbornly insisted that he was not involved in what happened to his sister. However, the police had enough evidence to ensure the jury would find him guilty. Amber's blood was found on his clothes and shoes, and his DNA was found on her body and underwear. The CCTV footage proved he was near the crime scene, and he didn't have an alibi. After analyzing the data from his cell phone, the police saw some quite peculiar search queries. Connor had strange hobbies, and his relationship with his sister always seemed strained and cold. Connor probably thought his tricks might confuse the investigation. According to the foster parents, they were unable to contact Connor for several days until Amber's body was found. He showed no interest in the search despite the concern of everyone around him. As already mentioned, 45-year-old Stephen Corrigan was also involved in this case. It was claimed Corrigan found Amber's body, but rather than alert the police, he inappropriately touched her and then hid her remains under bushes and branches. The court heard Corrigan told the police he was at a complete loss to explain why his DNA was found on 39 areas of Amber's body, including her breasts, buttocks, and thighs. Corrigan, who the court heard was not known to Amber Gibson, also denied the charge and had lodged a special defense of alibi. His father, William Corrigan, 79, told the court his son was at his home in Blantyre, South Lanarkshire, that weekend after a fall on ice, left his arm in a sling, and denied lying to protect him. Judge Mulholland told Corrigan he had been convicted of horrific crimes. He said, "Coming across a young girl who had been strangled to death, she was naked. Instead of alerting the authorities, you decide to handle her body all over from head to toe, including areas that were intimate private parts, and your DNA told the story." He told Corrigan he faces a lengthy sentence. Corrigan was sentenced to 9 years behind bars for defiling and concealing Amber's body. But the twisted father of two has launched a bid for freedom after instructing his legal team to challenge his conviction and the length of his sentence. Corrigan will not be released pending his appeal and remains in custody. In a statement, the former foster family of both siblings said that Amber was the most giving, loving, supportive, and admirable person, and their life will never be the same again. The family said, "She kept us on our toes and had the most amazing outlook on life, considering the suffering she had experienced." The statement continued, "When they arrived at our home, Amber aged 3 and Connor aged 5, Connor stated, 'We are safe now.' They were until he took her safety away." The family said both siblings had been let down by the system, adding, "As a family, we all feel this could have been prevented. We now have one daughter buried in Larkhall Cemetery and another child in prison." During the trial, Connor Gibson pleaded not guilty. The forensic pathologist who carried out the post-mortem examination on Amber's body told the court she was found covered in mud, and the cause of death was compression of the neck. Jurors also heard other forensic evidence that widespread bloodstaining on Gibson's jacket was compatible with Amber, and his DNA was also found on her shorts, worn as underwear, which had been forcibly torn off. Ian Curry, manager of Hill House Children's Home, told the court he spoke to Gibson at about 9 p.m. on November 26th after he called to speak with his sister, but noted him appearing sharp on the phone after making no greeting. The attorney conceded Gibson assaulted his sister, resulting in blunt force injuries, but said he did not cause her death, reminding them Amber's cause of death was compression of the neck. Concluding his remarks, he asked the jury to convict Gibson of assaulting Amber with every allegation deleted other than inflict blunt trauma to her head. The trial lasted 13 days before the jury found 20-year-old Connor Gibson guilty of what happened to his sister. Following the verdicts, Judge Mulholland told Gibson, "Your sister, the last person she saw was you strangling her. It was depraved, and you will pay a heavy price for that." On September 4th, 2023, the court sentenced Connor Gibson to life in prison with a minimum term of 22 years. Judge Mulholland told Gibson, "She was looking forward to meeting up with you on the night she was murdered. She even posted a selfie of both of you on Snapchat. What you did was truly evil." The judge said Gibson attempted to cover his tracks but added, "All your lies were exposed by the CCTV and the forensic science, who spoke for your sister." Amber was only 16 years old. She was an ordinary teenager who loved life and dreamed of a good future. She made plans and believed she could make them come true. But her life was cut short too soon. Amber's story reminds us how important it is to appreciate every moment of life, because no one is immune to unforeseen circumstances and betrayal by loved ones.